Rastan, a classic action platformer released by Taito in 1987, brings the thrill of sword and sorcery to the Sega Master System, with a compelling mix of hack-and-slash combat and adventure. Despite being one of the many arcade-to-console ports during the 80s, it manages to stand out with its solid gameplay, memorable soundtrack, and impressive visuals for the time. The gameplay in Rastan is straightforward yet satisfying. Players control the titular hero, Rastan, as he embarks on a quest to defeat evil creatures and save the kingdom. Armed with a sword, players engage in one-on-one combat with a variety of enemies. What sets Rastan apart from other action platformers of the time is the fluidity and responsiveness of the combat system. The controls are tight and intuitive, with the sword swings feeling weighty and impactful. Rastan can execute a variety of sword strikes. Players can press the attack button to slash in a wide arc, and the timing of these attacks is crucial, especially during close encounters with enemies. There's also a more powerful overhead strike that can be used to deal heavier damage to certain enemies. The action feels satisfying, especially when you manage to take down a cluster of enemies with a well-timed combo. However, combat can get repetitive as the game progresses, as the primary method of dealing with foes remains limited to these sword swings. Fortunately, the game does introduce some interesting enemy types that force players to think strategically. One of the standout features of Rastan is its diverse roster of enemies. While the game starts with fairly standard fare, goblins, bats, and slithering snakes, the enemy design becomes more varied as you progress through the levels. Some enemies require specific strategies to defeat, such as blocking or avoiding their attacks before retaliating, while others rely on speed and agility. Boss fights are a big highlight. Each stage concludes with a memorable boss battle, where Rastan must face off against a giant creature or an imposing villain. These boss encounters often require pattern recognition, precision, and careful timing to defeat. For example, one of the early bosses might be a large dragon that shoots fireballs, while later bosses can be massive, multi-phase battles, where the player has to deal with multiple types of attacks. The bosses feel like major milestones in the game, with each offering its own unique challenge and adding a sense of scale to the game. The level design is generally well crafted, with a good mix of platforming and combat. Players will encounter a variety of environments, including forests, caves, and castles. Each stage is packed with enemies, traps, and the occasional puzzle or obstacle, keeping things fresh despite the game's simple structure. For the Sega Master System, Rastan looks impressive. The sprite work is well detailed, and the character animations are smooth, especially considering the system's hardware limitations. The backgrounds are lush and varied, with each level having its own distinct atmosphere. While the visuals don't hold up to modern standards, they're a visual treat for an 8-bit console and help immerse players in the medieval fantasy setting. The enemy designs are also quite creative, with everything from skeletons and goblins to giant lizards and dragons making an appearance. The larger-than-life boss battles add a great deal of excitement and scale to the game. The soundtrack is one of the standout features of Rastan. The tunes are catchy, memorable, and perfectly suited for the action-packed adventure. The music evokes a sense of epic fantasy, while the sound effects are appropriately satisfying, especially when swinging the sword or defeating enemies. However, some may find the repetitive nature of the soundtrack a little wearing after long sessions. Rastan can be quite challenging, especially for players unfamiliar with its mechanics. The level of difficulty rises steadily as the game progresses, and the limited number of continues can make progression difficult at times. While this adds a layer of challenge, it may frustrate players who are less accustomed to this style of game. The difficulty might seem harsh by modern standards, but for fans of retro games, it's part of the charm. Rastan is an underrated gem on the Sega Master System. Its combination of action, sword combat, and fantasy storytelling, along with its solid visuals and catchy soundtrack, make it a fun, if occasionally frustrating, experience. While it may not be as refined as later titles in the genre, It's a solid entry in the action-adventure category, and a worthy addition to any retro gamer's collection. If you're a fan of old-school action platformers, Rastan is definitely worth revisiting.